All right, show me 5. Let's hear what some of those words are, what some of those feelings are. Remember, just one word, feelings. Anxiety. Frustrated. What was that? Irritated. Oh, these are good words. Stressed. Defeated. Angry. You've had it. You're tired. All right. Okay, that is quite a list. Anxious, stressed, defeated, overwhelmed, frustrated, angry. All right, so guess what? Feelings are involuntary, right? So feelings are just elicited from environmental stimuli. A child engages in some challenging behavior that you find personally difficult, right? And this feeling is elicited, right? Oh, I feel a little tight in my stomach. Oh, I can feel my jaw clenching a little bit, okay? So feelings are just elicited from environmental stimuli, okay? The issue is that sometimes we then have a secondary feeling, so then we're like, now I feel guilty because I'm feeling angry because this kid's only 4. Now I'm feeling bad. Now I'm feeling even more overwhelmed. So what happens is that if our feelings, these negative feelings that are elicited, are left to fester, right? And they start influencing the way that we're thinking about the situation, it affects the way that we behave in that situation. So your feelings, your thoughts, and your behaviors are all linked. And while you might not be able to control the feeling that gets elicited involuntarily from this experience, from the environment, you can intervene with your thinking and your behaving in ways that can set you on a more positive path. So what I want you to think about is, instead of thinking like, I'm feeling kind of mad, I'm feeling kind of frustrated, I want you to think about that as almost a healthy warning system for you, okay? Because when a child engages in a behavior, and you listed quite some doozies there, when a child engages in those behaviors and you feel mad, frustrated, defeated, overwhelmed, embarrassed, lots of different feelings, I want you to think, all right, that's right. This is a behavior that if the child continues to engage in it without my help and support, then it might not be good for them long term, right? So it is healthy for you to recognize that there are some behaviors that we need to help and support children to do something different. The other thing that I want you to do is to say, I'm feeling that feeling in my stomach, or I'm feeling that feeling in my toes, or in my foot, however it is that you feel that, and I want you to say, I need to check in with how I'm thinking, okay? Because this negative feeling left to fester is going to affect the way that you're thinking about the child, about the situation, about your colleagues, about the parents, and go on and on and on. And that's going to affect the way that you behave. So let me give you some examples of managing this personal thought, some kind of stress stuff here. All right, so Amanda, next one. All right, we're going to go through some managing some personal stress here. And so I'm going to you're going to have to push a lot of buttons. Just push the first one. All right, so here's a stressful, upsetting thought that I don't know if anybody has had, but something that sometimes people have, which is that child is a problem, right? And then I can't read what the rest of it says. Oh, this is getting ridiculous. Okay, I don't know if you've ever had that thought, right? So you have that feeling and you start thinking that way. But let's think if we can interrupt that thought and give it more positive thinking. So if we interrupted the thought, a more calming, coping thought might be, hey, this child's just testing to see where my limits are, okay? And I can teach them more appropriate ways to behave. So think about the way that you might act with the upsetting thought and the way you might act with the calming and coping thought, and which one will be more supportive of a young child's social and emotional development. All right, let's do another one. I'm sick of putting out fires, right? And the calming coping thought is, hey, I'm in control and I can just work on some routines and teach them more appropriate ways to behave, right? That's my job. I'm the teacher, I'm the adult here. They're a young child that needs my guidance. Again, thinking about which one will be more effective. All right, let's see the next one. All right. I wonder if Walmart is hiring. Okay. Not going to help children if you're checking the want ads. All right. So, hey, that's a sign to you that you want to seek out some support from your supervisors and your peers, okay? We're going to go to the next one, and this is going to be kind of our golden one. All right, the next one, the upsetting thought is that he ruins everything. It's going to be the worst year of my career. All right? That's a pretty upsetting thought. I know that I had some behaviors that made me think that. Not very helpful thinking. So let's get to kind of our golden thought, which is this calming coping thought. Having him in my class is going to be a wonderful professional development experience. Okay? So I say that, and it always makes me smile because I think it's kind of funny, but it really makes me smile because guess what? We know this is true. Imagine if children with some challenging behavior came to you to help challenge you to become a better teacher. Right? Somehow, somewhere, the universe knew that you needed some opportunities to be challenged, to grow. Maybe as a parent, maybe as a teacher. And it's absolutely true. When we think about how we can best support a child with some challenging behavior, we learn new strategies that not only work with that child, but work with other children. Our room starts to get a little bit smoother. We start to engage in some more creative teaching. We are far better teachers at the end of the year if we take the challenge than we would have been if we don't. So I want you to think about, as aggravating, as frustrating, as real as those feelings are that you have, that they're there as an opportunity for you to grow. Okay. All right, let's go to our next slide. All right, I want you to think for just a minute, and this is something that I want you to write in your composition book that you have. So open up those composition books. And what's helpful is right now it is calm. Right now we don't have any challenging behavior going on. I want you to think for just a minute, what can be your positive thought that comes to you in a moment of stress, okay? Maybe you already have one. What is your positive thought that can come to you? These can be funny, these can be spiritual, they can be serious, they can be poignant, they can be short, they can be long. I want you to take a minute and write down a positive thought. All right, show me 5. Thank you. I'm going to ask if anybody, it's not required, is anybody willing to share their positive thought? Oh, please. So say it really loud. Life's tough, but I'm tougher. All right. Okay, right there. I can have a glass of wine when this is over. All right. Okay. All right. Okay. All right. What's another one? Yeah, please. Ooh, can you say that again? No weapon formed against me shall prosper. All right. Okay, oh, we got one back here. Say it really loud. Oh my gosh, did everyone hear that? I am making a difference in this child's life. Oh, here we go. Right over there, right behind you. Okay, say it one more time.
I'm not near the speaker.
Oh my gosh. Okay. So I am making a difference in this child's life. And then say the last part again. Oh, good. Okay. All right. Back there, I'm going to have you I see your hand right up. Yep. Oh, this child needs love. They're asking for it in a really weird way, but they need love. All right. Back there. Yes, in purple, I think, with your hands up. Ponytail. Something with God, all things are possible. All right. Oh my gosh, that's great. And then back here, last one in the stripes. Yeah. Yep.
I love my job and I'm good at it.
All right. These are excellent. Okay. I want you to make sure that this positive thought that you came up with is someplace where you can see it when you need it the most, okay? So it might be that you tape it to your bathroom mirror so that every day before you go to work, you can see it and read it. It might be that you need to put it next to the clock in the classroom, right? Because when you're looking at the clock a lot is probably when you need that positive inspiration. Maybe it's on a staff bulletin board where you'll see it. Maybe you keep it in your journal that you look at. But wherever it is, the more often you can think about that in a calm time, the more likely it is to come to you in those moments when you are being called to be that positive change in that child's life. No matter how weird and uncomfortable and distressing that challenging behavior is, you are being called to make a positive difference in the child's life. All right, so we're going to talk about some practical strategies around program-wide positive behavioral support. So you can click. So we're going to talk about, many of you maybe have seen what we call the teaching pyramid. And so I'm just going to tell you an overview of the teaching pyramid, and then we're going to dive into some certain parts. But essentially, the teaching pyramid is a framework. It's just a way to think about positive behavioral support for young children. So at the bottom is what every child and adult needs, and that's positive relationship. Every child needs at least one person who is crazy about them. And for every child in your classroom, that might be you. Okay? So the foundation is positive relationships. The next part is creating supportive environments. There are things that you do in your preschool classrooms every day, very intentionally, to support children and set them up for success, okay? Those are the things we're talking about. The next one is to teach social and emotional skill development, okay? So just like what Amanda said, just like we're teaching the alphabet, just like we're teaching numeracy, we need to teach social and emotional skills, all right? And then at the very top are what we call these intensive, individualized interventions. And the theory here is that the more things that we have at the bottom of the pyramid in place, the fewer children will need to have these intensive interventions, okay? So we concentrate a lot of our time and effort on making sure that the bottom of the pyramid's in place for all children and families, and then we can decrease not only those red arrow moments, but we decrease the number of children who need these really intensive individualized interventions. Now, all of the teaching pyramid is based on some theoretical basis around challenging behavior, and I'm going to talk about that right now. Well, actually, what's my next slide? So I'm going to talk about that right now. So one of the things that we believe, those of us who developed the teaching pyramid believe, and my guess is you know to be true, is that challenging behavior communicates, right? When children are experiencing challenging behavior in the classroom, it's communicating a message to you. So sometimes children use challenging behavior when they don't yet have verbal language. It's why 2-year-olds are at the height of physical aggression. Did you know that? The most aggressive individuals in our world are 2-year-olds because they don't have language yet, right? But we see it drop off. The challenge behavior drops off when their language comes in. But for some children, it persists. It stays high. So sometimes children engage in challenging behavior because they don't have language or they don't have the words that we want them to use. And some children use challenging behavior because they don't have the emotional regulation skills yet. They don't have the social skills yet. They need you to support them to learn those. So challenging behavior communicates a message, and it's used if I don't have language, if I don't have the right language, or if I don't have social and emotional skills. Okay, next slide, please. Here's the other thing to know. Challenging behavior persists in your classrooms because it works. Okay? It is somehow working for them. Somehow children are getting what they need by engaging in challenging behavior. And you might be saying to yourself, what? I usually am, maybe I yell at them, or maybe I firmly talk to them, or why would they want that? Somehow they're wanting your attention. And challenging behavior is persisting because it's working for them. We're allowing that to get them what they need. Okay? If it stopped working for them, then they would no longer engage in it. All right? So somehow, something in our environment, whether it's like the materials they can access by engaging in challenging behavior, or the peer they can access by engaging in challenging behavior, or the demand that they can escape by engaging in challenging behavior, or the attention they can get from their teacher, whether it's positive or negative, by engaging in challenging behavior, somehow that's working for them. Okay? So what we have to figure out is, what is the message children are trying to send to us, and what is working for them with challenging behavior? Okay? All right. So let's just watch this little video clip again, and I want you to think about what message we think this child is sending to us with their challenge behavior. So I don't know if you can get that to work again if you hover over it. Oh, there it is. All right, we can stop it right there. What message do you think he's trying to send? He doesn't want to go in the library. I had a colleague watch this once, and they said, I know what to do the next time someone tries to get me in a library. so he doesn't want to go in the library. Maybe the last time he went, it was scary. Maybe the last time he went, it was boring. Maybe he wanted to carry the books. Okay, he was like, I want it, right? So we have to figure out, just like you did, we have to figure out what is the message the child is trying to send with their challenging behavior. All right, let's go to the next slide. All right, so here's what happens. So whenever we communicate, these are important words to know to help us get through the morning part. So whenever people communicate, like I am communicating right now by standing and talking, there are two things that we think about, dimensions we call them. We talk about the form, right? Here's the form of the behavior I'm using. I'm standing on a stage and I'm talking into a microphone. The form and the function. The function is I'm talking about strategies for positive behavioral support. So if we think about that little boy in the library, the form was running away, going boneless, kicking and screaming, right? That was the description of the behavior. That was the form. But the function was the message. Maybe it was, I want to carry the books. Maybe it was, I don't want to go in. I want to escape this activity. Maybe it was, I want attention from my mom. I think it's fun when she holds my arm like that. Okay? So every time we think about challenging behavior, we want to think about the form and the function. And what's different now is that it used to be many years ago when I was beginning teaching, it used to be that we would come up with strategies for the form, right? It used to be that we would say, if they bite, do this. If they hit, do this. But the problem is, if we don't address the function, we might get rid of one challenging behavior, but it's just going to be replaced by another challenging behavior, right? So we have to address the function. We have to think about, how can I help this child find another way, a more appropriate way to get their needs met? Wow, they are trying so hard, but how can I help them find another way? How could I help them say, I want to carry the books instead of the falling down and dragging? So what we want to think about is, what message are they sending, right? I don't like this activity. I want to get away from this activity. I'm overstimulated. I'm understimulated. I don't like to sit next to this person. I want to turn. I want your attention. I don't want your attention. I want a new teacher. So what are they trying to communicate, right? Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so children, of course, communicate in many ways. There's many forms. They can use words. They can use inappropriate words. They can use full sentences. They can use eye gaze to tell you what they're looking at. They could pull your hand over to show you what they're looking for. They can cry. They can bite. They can hit. They can kick. So remember, those are all the forms. Those are all the different ways they communicate. And then we can think about the different functions, right? A lot of different messages. I want something. I'm trying to request something, right? If I'm at the Play-Doh table and somebody has that really cool garlic press and I take a bite out of their arm and they drop it and I grab it, I'm probably trying to communicate that I would like to use the garlic press, okay? But I don't either have the words to do that, or somebody hasn't taught me to say, can I have a turn? I might be trying to escape a demand. I used to have this little boy in my classroom, Ramon. He was an awesome kid. He had mild cerebral palsy that affected the right side of his body, so he was a bit compromised with his fine motor skills. And whenever we would come to the small group table, I finally figured it out, because it didn't happen every day. But when we would come sit around the small group table and there were scissors, he would run. He would start screaming. He would try and escape the classroom. If I tried to bring him back, he would kick me. What do you think the message was? Scissors were too hard. He wasn't good at scissors. And when he saw scissors, he tried to escape the demand, right? That was his challenge behavior. So what I had to do is teach him how to use the scissors so he felt successful. Give him some adaptive scissors. Modify the activity, right? Challenge behavior went away. Increased engagement. All right, sometimes we're trying to escape an activity. Sometimes we're trying to escape a person. Somebody scares me. Somebody's too loud. Somebody's wearing too much perfume. Somebody has coffee breath. Whatever it is, it just reminds me that I've got really bad coffee breath. You're so lucky to be out there and away from me. They might be requesting help, right? They might be starting to hit themselves on their head because they need you to help them with something, right? They might be requesting social interaction, right? They might be running around on the playground and punching kids because what they really want is to join a game of tag. But they need you to teach them how to do that, okay? They might just be making a comment. They might be requesting more information. So there's lots of different functions. So your job is to figure out the behavior equation, to figure out what message are they trying to communicate with their challenging behavior, and how can I either create an environment that doesn't set them off, right? And how can I teach them a more appropriate way to get their needs met? Okay? All right. So you have to solve what we call the behavior equation. There's no math involved, but there is some thinking that really is deep that you have to do. So what we think about with the behavior equation is we think about the trigger, the behavior, and then what we would call the maintaining consequence. What is happening after that somehow is making that challenging behavior work and continue to work for that child? So you all did that really quickly when you were watching the videotape of the child going into the library. You were thinking about what happens right before. You did this really well. What happens right before? What's the behavior? And then what's the consequence? So here we have Joey. So Joey's asked to come to circle. Ding, ding, ding. Time to come to circle. Come on, Joey, come over to circle. Joey doesn't come, so the teacher kind of provides a physical prompt to get him there. Joey resists, cries, and hits the teacher. So he's got a lot of forms of his behavior. And the consequence is the teacher says, moves away and says, okay, Joey, you don't have to come to circle. You can choose a different activity. What do you think the message is that Joey's trying to send with his challenging behavior? What's the function? All right, so he doesn't want to go to circle, or he wants to go to a different center, okay? So he's not doing that just because he's bad. He's not doing that just to get the teacher. There's a function there, right? So great behavior equation solving here. He either wants to escape circle time. Maybe it's too boring. Maybe it's too complicated for him. Maybe he what? Oh, maybe he doesn't like who he sits next to. So you have to be a very good observer, absolutely. So you know what, I had this little boy, Cesar, in my classroom, and you know how some children suck their thumb and rub their ear like this? So Cesar would suck his thumb and rub the ear of the kid next to him. So he always had to be sitting next to somebody at circle time that would be tolerant of that. So you're right, maybe he doesn't like who he sits next to. So there's lots of different functions that we could figure out. He either wants to escape circle time because he doesn't like it, maybe he doesn't like who he sits next to, maybe he doesn't like circle time, or maybe he wants to go to a different activity. Maybe what he really, 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 really loves is that computer station. And he doesn't want to go to circle time because he'd rather be at the computer station, okay? So you have to use your behavior equation. All right, next slide. Okay, here's one other part of the behavior equation that I want you to consider. So remember, you have the trigger, the behavior, the form of the behavior, and then the consequence. What happens after is really important for us to know what the function is. But there's one other thing that sometimes is at play. And especially, it's especially important to consider when we are working with young children, because it's not something that they can communicate to us. So a setting event is something that happened before they even came to you, perhaps. And it sets them up for more challenging behavior. It happens to adults too, right? Have you ever come to work and you didn't have a very good night's sleep? And you usually are not kind of rude to your colleague, but maybe today you are, right? So something sets you up to engage in more challenging behavior, okay? So for young children, again, it might happen before, it might happen on the bus on the way into your classroom. It might happen at home. It might have been the night before. And so why this is something to consider is that sometimes you might think that you've got the, that the child engages in behavior, most of the days it's appropriate, and some days it's like they've had a terrible day, but it seems inconsistent. It's usually because there's a setting event at play. So let me just give you an example of that. So here's our friend Kwan. So here's our behavior equation. So the trigger is that Kwan goes over to the computer and he sees another child working on it, okay? Another child's at the computer. Now on most days, the behavior Kwan engages in is he moves his picture to indicate that he's next, as the teacher has this really lovely taking turns chart, and you just put your name, you put your picture if you want to be next, right? So he puts his picture up. He waits for the child to be done. And then he sits down and starts working. No challenging behavior. On most days, that is how Quan behaves. But once in a while, there's a setting event. So once in a while, Quan has asthma, and he's up all night with an asthma attack. He's not sleeping very well. He comes in, and you can kind of tell because he's got some dark circles under his eyes. He hasn't been sleeping. So now we have the same trigger, right? He goes over to his favorite station, the computer, and he sees another child working on it. But instead of remaining calm and waiting for his turn, he just does this thing where he pushes the child, off the chair, and then he starts working on the computer. So every once in a while, a setting event might also be at play, right? What might have happened at home? What might have happened on the bus? Maybe the child's hungry. Maybe I had one little guy, Mickey, and he would come into the classroom. Every once in a while, he'd come into the classroom, and he would just start the morning by jumping the sensory table, doing some big, huge act. And you know what we figured out what it was? Is that when his mom worked the late shift, and his teenage siblings were in charge of getting him ready, doing laundry and things like that, they wanted to get their clothes dry before his, so they would put their clothes in the dryer, and they'd give Mickey wet jeans to wear to school. Do you know how uncomfortable wet jeans are? Wouldn't you want to throw things if you had wet jeans on? And you were so it took a lot of kind of communication with the family, what's going on. Now here's the thing, you might not always be able to address a setting event. One of the great things about Head Start is we have comprehensive services, so we can try and help support the family as much as possible, but we might not be able to prevent the asthma attack that Quan has, right? So what does that mean? It means we have to have great communication with the family, and it means we have to have great empathy for the child. And sometimes if we know a setting event is at play, it just means that we lessen the demands on the child that day, that we sit a little bit closer to them that day, that we give them a few more hugs and a little bit more reassurance that day, right? So we soften the landing for them. Just like you would appreciate if you got up late, you overslept, you were running late, your car broke down on the way to work, you were frazzled by the time you got there, and somebody had a warm cup of coffee and said, hey, I got it, take a break for 5 minutes. You'd soften it, right? So sometimes we just have to think about, how do we soften this for this child today? All right, so we've got the behavior equation, and then we're also thinking about sometimes there's a setting event at play and sometimes there's not. All right, let's go. What things, I want you to brainstorm at your table, what things might be setting events for young children that you're working with? I just want you to be thinking about that. So talk at your tables. Okay, show me 5. Excellent, thank you for doing that so well. Okay, just a couple things, shout out a couple things that you think might be setting events for children. What was that? Daycare, okay, great. I'm so sorry, I'm asking you to shout things out and then I can't hear anything. I live with a drummer, so that is probably what happens with my hearing. So something maybe happened at childcare before they came to you, right? Maybe something happened, that's all we know. Okay, what else might be a setting event? Yeah, go ahead. Yeah. Oh, they might be hungry. Oh my gosh, if you're hungry and you come in and breakfast is not there right away, you might be hungry, yeah. Oh yeah, maybe the morning was so rushed and the parent was stressed out and it was just a really off morning. Oh yeah, they didn't get to wear what they wanted to wear. That would be a setting event for me. All right, go ahead. All right, maybe they had a visit with their biological parents. They're in foster care. Maybe they had a visit and that kind of threw them off. Very, very thoughtful, astute. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, maybe something's happening at home and there was a big flare-up or something. Yes, go ahead. Oh my gosh, a different bus picked them up. If you're 4 years old and the bus looks different, the bus driver looks different, that can throw you. Very thoughtful. Back there in the very back. No sleep. Sleep is a huge one, a huge trigger. Okay, very good. Mom was supposed to bring him to school, but she didn't. Somebody else brought him instead. Okay, so you're picking up on all these great setting events. Sometimes a medication, there might be a medication change or a medication started and they forgot to tell the teacher. So lots of things that can be setting events, all right? So it's important to have really good communication with parents. This is sometimes when we have those communication logs that go back and forth, and it might just be like good sleep, bad sleep, right? Like, did they get enough sleep, not get enough sleep, so that you have information. But really, what we just want to know is to say, gosh, something might have happened before that set this child up, okay? All right, let's go back to the behavior equation. So remember that to do the behavior equation, we have to think about what happens before, what's the trigger, what the behavior is, the form of the behavior, and then what is what we call the maintaining consequence, okay? So let's, I want you to read on the screen about Evan in the Duplos, and at your table, I want you to identify the trigger, the behavior, and the consequence, and then what you think the possible function is. What message is Evan sending? You don't think they can see it all? Okay, all right. So I'm going to read it. Sorry, I'm operating under some different situations. I'll read this along. Evan is playing with Duplos. He tries to attach a block to his stack of 3. He can't quite get the blocks to connect. He looks up at the adult and begins fussing. He holds the stack of blocks up, looks at the blocks, and looks at the adult. The adult helps him put the blocks together. Okay, so at your table, what's the trigger, the behavior, the consequence, and the possible function? All right, what is the trigger? Just shout it out. Can't get the blocks to connect. Great, that's the trigger. What's the behavior? Fussing, that's the form. What's the consequence? The teacher helps. What do you think the function is? He wanted help. He's trying to obtain help. Very good. All right, he's trying to obtain help. We're going to do one more, and then we're going to take a break. Woo! All right, let's do one more. All right, so I'm going to come over here and read this one. Sorry for this. All right. This is about Shayna. Can you turn it just a little bit more? Thank you, friend. All right, Shayna is sitting at the table waiting for snack. She sees the fish crackers. Her teacher tells her to wait until all of the kids are sitting. Shayna crawls onto the table and grabs a handful of crackers and stuffs them in her mouth. Her teacher tells her to sit down on her chair and removes the crackers from the table. Shayna licks the cracker remnants from her hands and leaves the table to go over to another snack table. All right. So at your tables, the trigger, the behavior, the consequence, and what the possible function is. All right, show me 5. Okay, what's the trigger? There's snack on the table, right? That's what happens right before. What's the behavior? Crawling up on the table and grabbing fish crackers, stuffing them in her mouth. What's the consequence? The teacher tells her to sit down, removes the crackers, right? But we also see that she leaves and goes to another table to get some crackers. So that stuff that happens after that behavior helps us think. What do you think the function is of Shayna's behavior? To get fish crackers. And what might have been a setting event for Shayna? She was hungry. All right. Okay, you've done good work. We're going to take a 15-minute break. I'm going to start back up in 15 minutes, and I would love for you to be back here in 15 minutes. So 15-minute break. All right. We're going to continue a little bit with, we're just going to do a little bit more with the behavior equation, and then and then we're going to have lunch, or we're going to break for lunch, and then I want to tell you that in the afternoon, the whole afternoon, are the practical strategies to help you prevent challenging behavior and teach young children the social and emotional skills that they need. So somebody was very kind to come up at break and say, it's going great, we really need those strategies. And I just want to let you know that we're going to get to those strategies in the afternoon. So we're going to do a little bit more here, and then we're going to break for lunch. And then in the afternoon, it's going to be the top 10 tips for preventing challenging behavior and promoting social and emotional skills, okay? Let me also tell you, because we did not say this, I didn't say this earlier, they're videotaping this, and you have all of the, your program has all of the slides I'm showing. So they will make those available to you in some way. So you'll get all the slides. So if you're wanting to if you wanted to share these or look back at them, please know that you're going to get those. Okay, so let's go to another slide here. Okay, so this is Tim. We're going to do just a couple more of these, and then I'm going to actually have you watch a video. I'm going to read this one. So this is Tim, and Tim is riding a bike on the playground, a bike path. He sees a child move to the sandbox where he had just finished building a roadway. He leaps off his trike and tackles the child. He hits the child. An adult comes over to intervene. She comforts the child and scolds Tim. Tim goes to the sandbox and continues construction on his roadway. Okay, so what do you think the trigger is? Somebody goes over to his stuff. What do you think the behavior is? Attacking, that one's pretty obvious. What's the consequence? And what do you think the function is? He wants to obtain the toy. Will you advance this slide? So here we have this is the behavior equation as we wrote it out. Does that match what you're thinking? Okay, you're very good at this. On your table, there is a handout that has 2 observation cards. So it should have something that kind of looks like, it should have like a trigger. Yep, there you go. So it looks like, kind of looks like what you see up here, a little bit different. These are actually the type of behavior observation cards that we would use in classrooms to help us start understanding why is the child engaging in this behavior. Because we have to figure out the why. We have to figure out what's setting them up, what the trigger is. We have to understand what the function is in order for us to support the child, okay? We can't just address the form. So you can't just say, well, they bang their head, or well, they hit people, or well, they bite people. We have to understand what sets them up and what the trigger is, and also what function it's serving in order to do our best work at supporting the child's with challenging behavior. So I'm gonna, forgive me for 1 second, I'm just gonna have you advance our slides a few more because I'm gonna go through the next couple, so go ahead, keep going. Captain Bob is doing this for me, and I so appreciate it. And keep going. Okay, so this is the observation card that you have. So it would have the name, would be the name of the child, and who was doing the observing, that would be you. It's always great to have the date and the time. And then the general context, we just say, you know, it's outside time, or it's center time, or it's free choice time. And then we have, if there's a setting event at play, if we think there's a setting event, we can write that down. And then otherwise, there's a trigger, the behavior, and the consequence are the things that you would be observing. And then at the bottom, you're going to write the possible function. What's your best guess at why that child's engaging in that challenging behavior? So I apologize that we're having some difficulty with sound. So I'm hoping that you're going to be able to just watch this next video clip. Just observe. I don't think that you actually have to hear anything. You're going to observe what happens. And you're going to write, you're going to take notes as if you're in the classroom and you're observing this child's behavior, okay? So we're going to watch Tim, and then we're going to So we're going to make this video go. You're going to watch Tim. He's in the red shirt. And you're going to try and capture the trigger, the behavior, and the consequence. Okay, so with your best recollection, write down the trigger, what happens right before the behavior, the consequence, and then your best guess at the function. Okay. Raise your hand if you think you have this one solved. Okay, raise your hand if you have a possible function in mind, what you think that challenge of behavior was doing. Some people do. Okay, some people aren't quite sure. Still thinking? Okay, I'm going to show you what we wrote, and you can see if it matches yours. Okay? So the trigger is, right, it's center time. Tim is alone. People maybe noted that. He's alone, kind of in the block area. He goes over and then kind of goes over to where the group of the children are. And so the behavior that he engages in is hitting, first he blows a raspberry. He does a little, and then he hits, and then he scratches, right? So three things, three kind of forms there. The consequence is the peer kind of yells, he hurt my shoulder, and and hits back. And then, what do you think the possible function was? He didn't know how to speak, but what does he want to do? He wants to play. He just wants to play, and he does not know how to do that. So he either doesn't have words, so he's using that, or he doesn't have the social skills and he needs you to teach him, right? So one of the things his friends found out about him is that he really liked to have the same thing that his other friends had. So not only did he want to play, but he really wanted to have the same thing. So I don't know if I've seen this video like 8 million times, so I don't know if you saw this in the first viewing, but another kid runs over and throws him a lizard. He's like, there! But Tim, oh, he needs us. He needs us to help teach him how to say, can I play? Or, you know what, that's not always the best way to enter play, right? Because if you say, especially if you've had a history of hitting and you go and say, can I play? What do you think kids are going to say? No, right? So we might teach them some other ways, like we might teach them to bring a toy over and just play next to them, right? So we're going to teach Tim. All right, you've got a second observation card. Let's watch Tim outside. Again, I apologize, there's not any sound, but you can get a lot from just viewing it. Let's watch Tim outside and take that behavior equation again. He's in the red shirt. Okay, at your tables, write down the trigger, the behavior, the consequence, and then what you think the possible function is, your best guess. All right, let's see if you wrote things down similar to this. So the general context is outside, and he sees the girl get a truck that's actually very similar to the truck that his friend has. So that seems to be the trigger. The behavior is there's a lot of grabbing, shoving. That little girl hangs in there. She has had some, that's good. But there's some shoving, there's some grabbing. And then the consequence is he gets the truck for a little bit, right? He gets it for a moment and he kind of relaxes. That's a really good clue as to what it is that he wants. Because if his challenging behavior stops, then it means that that's what he wanted, right? So he gets it for a minute, a little bit relaxed, she takes it back, whatever. The teacher comes over and removes him, okay? So the possible function is to get the toy, right? To get the toy. So in that situation, we need, again, language, right? If he could say, I want that truck. Or he could say, if it's not about language, maybe it's about social skills, like, can I have a turn when you're done, right? And being able to wait a turn. Maybe we can even prevent it by having more trucks out on the playground that all look the same, right? Because we know that young children like to have similar things. So there's some ways that we could think about preventing the trigger from even occurring. There's some behaviors we can think about maintaining, or some new behaviors we can think about teaching. But the teacher removing him from that situation didn't teach him anything, right? That doesn't teach him anything, because as soon as she puts him back, he runs back and does the same behavior. So we want to think about teaching new replacement skills that help the child get their needs met. All right. So this is when we think about supporting children with challenging behavior, and I recognize that you are dealing with some extreme behaviors in your classrooms. I had a few people come up to me on break, and I think it feels to you like, and I believe it to be true, that the behaviors are increasing and that they're getting a little bit more extreme than what maybe you've seen in the past. And so I definitely understand that, and I feel for you because you already have a really hard job, and that's hard. So I want to tell you what a behavior kind of intervention chart would look like for children with really challenging behaviors. But then what we're going to do is really make sure that our base is secure, that we've got lots of good prevention things in place. So the best behavior charts that I've ever seen, and my whole career has been focused on young children with challenging behavior, so I have seen a lot of them. I've seen 30-page single type space by, child psychologist type behavior plans. And I've seen huge IEP, I've seen everything, but I have got to tell you that the most effective ones seem to be ones that are done on one piece of paper that look kind of like what you're seeing here, okay? They don't need to be huge and typed out. They just need to be really thoughtful, okay? So one of the things that I would do when I had a child with some real challenging behavior that pushed my buttons, but behavior also that was interrupting their quality of life. It was interrupting their ability to make friends. It was interrupting their ability to learn in the classroom. That was really the concern. So when I had children that were engaging in those types of behaviors, we would do these types of behavior charts. So you all did the behavior equation. That is what goes across the top. So as a teaching team, my assistant teacher and I, the family service worker, any other specialists, and the parents together, we would say, what's the behavior equation across the top? And if there were a lot of behaviors, we would just pick one. And we would say, what's the trigger, right? What tends to happen before? What tends to be sometimes we call it the antecedent, right? What happens usually right before they engage in the challenge behavior? And you could just do this on a big piece of flip chart paper. What's the trigger? We would write that down. What is the behavior that we're concerned about? And remember, if there was a lot of them, we would go with, just one. What's the behavior? And sometimes there was a lot of behaviors that would come together, so we'd write the behaviors down. And then what's the consequence? What currently happens, right? So maybe at home, when they were at home and the parents said to turn the television off, the child started screaming and jumping on the furniture and throwing things, and then the consequence would be that the parent would say, okay, you can watch one more show, right? So that might be what was happening at the trigger behavior consequence. At school, it might be that the teacher asks the child to come to circle time, and the child throws a tantrum, screams, throws things, and so the teacher says, all right, you can go back to the computer, right? So it's whatever was happening right after that seems to be the, like when the challenge behavior stops, that would be our clue as to what that behavior was, right? At home, it clearly was wanting to continue to watch television. At circle time, or at school, it was clearly wanting to continue to be on the computer or not be at circle, okay? So we would write the behavior equation across the top so that we were really clear on the triggers, the behaviors, and the consequences. And then at the bottom, that's your behavior support plan. So instead of the triggers, what could we do to prevent the challenging behavior from occurring in the first place, right? So maybe if at school, if it's around circle time, maybe some prevention strategies are to give the child an individual warning about circle time happening. Maybe it would be to give the child a special job to help them set up circle time, and that would get them there. Maybe it would be to start circle time with some kind of fun, interactive tablet thing that was kind of like the computer or the television that they really loved, so that they would be attracted to come over. Maybe it would be to keep circle time short. Maybe it would be to have them sit next to somebody that they really enjoyed or somebody that would model good behavior. Maybe it would be to give every child their own little space to sit at circle time so that the child knew where they needed to keep their body in space. Maybe it would be to sit the child furthest from the door so that if they did bolt, we would have a better chance to get them back to their circle time spot. So you can think of a million different prevention strategies. That's what you would put underneath. How can we even prevent this behavior from occurring in the first place? And then on the instead of the challenging behavior, what do we want them to do instead that would help them get their needs met? Okay? What do we want them to do instead that would help them get their needs met? It's not what's the most desirable behavior we can come up with, but what is the more appropriate way for them to get their needs met? This one is tricky sometimes, because let's take this example at circle time. So if at circle time, we say, Tim, come on over to circle time, and Tim comes for a second and then throws a tantrum and starts throwing things and hitting things, and I say, okay, go ahead, he can go to the computer, don't worry about it, right? So we would be reinforcing it for sure. So we don't want him to throw a tantrum, right? So what we want him to do is to use his words. Eventually what we want him to do is to sit and learn and participate at circle time. But that's not the function. The function of his behavior is he wants to get away from circle time. So maybe what we want to teach Tim is to say, I need a break. Right? And then we're going to let him have a break, and then maybe we'll bring him back, and when he says, I need a break, then he can have a break again. And then pretty soon, he's going to say, I need a break, and we're going to say, oh, in 5 more pages, you can have a break, right? And then we're going to teach him a tolerance and teach him to enjoy. We're going to do all those prevention strategies, too, where circle time becomes really fun and engaging and exciting to him. But we're also going to teach him a more appropriate way to get his needs met. Okay? So that's sometimes where we get confused, because we think, well, what we want is for him to sit and learn and participate at circle. Yes, that's absolutely what we want. But his behavior plan, what we need to do is help him find a more appropriate way to get his needs met. Otherwise, the challenge behavior is going to stick around. Okay? So we have to think about, well, what is he trying to do? Is he trying to ask for a turn to play? Well, we need to teach him a more appropriate way to do that. Maybe Tim, in our situation that was clawing and scratching, maybe he doesn't have words. And so our replacement skill isn't that he uses complete sentences and says, excuse me, would you mind if I play with you? I'd love to, But maybe instead it is for him just to like tap him on the shoulder instead of scratching, right? To get his attention. And then maybe we're teaching his peers that to be a good friend would be to invite him to play, okay? So we got to think about what's the function, and then that's how we're going to come up with those replacement skills that go underneath, right? What do we want the child to do instead of the challenging behavior? And then finally, when we think about the last column, remember in the behavior equation, it's what tends to make that behavior continue to work and reinforce that behavior. So what we want to think about now is, what are we going to do when they use their new skill? We taught them a new way to behave. When they use their new skill, we need to make sure that it always gets their needs met, right? It has to work just as fast and be just as effective as that challenging behavior, or they're going to be like, why would I do this? Why would I use my words and wait for 20 minutes and never get what I need when I can hit them and get it right away, right? So we want to make sure that if they use their words and say, I need a break, they get a break right away. If they use their words and say, can I have a turn, they get a turn right away at first. Then we're going to work on, having to wait a little bit, right? But right now what we want to show them is that your appropriate behavior gets your needs met, right? What a fantastic skill you could help a child learn. My appropriate behavior helps me get my needs met. Okay, the other thing though is that when the challenging behavior occurs, we have to make sure that doesn't get their needs met, okay? So we have to try and figure out how we're going to ignore or redirect that behavior for them to use their more appropriate words, okay? So we might have to say, when you're quiet, then you can have a turn. When you're sitting, then you can have snack, right? So we'll redirect it for them to use their appropriate behavior, and then they're going to get their needs met, okay? And then if you haven't heard this before, let me tell you this. When you first start doing one of these behavior plans and you stop reinforcing the challenging behavior, so remember, if you're continuing to see challenging behavior in your classroom, something that is happening in that classroom is reinforcing it, right? And oftentimes, it's us. We're giving them attention. Even if we don't think it's positive attention, we're giving them attention, right? So when you stop reinforcing the challenge behavior, it's going to get worse before it gets better. So you've probably heard this before. It's called an extinction burst, right? So what I want you to do when that happens is I want you to say, all right, we did it. We solved the behavior equation. We know what it was trying to do, right? And then you got to hang together as a team. You got to get your positive thoughts out. You got to stay with it, because when you start to withdraw attention from the challenge behavior, they're going to be like, I don't think she heard me, right? They're going to do it louder. They're going to do it more exaggerated. You're going to go through that extinction burst, keep everybody safe, most importantly the children safe. And you're going to keep each other, you're going to say, we can do it, we did it, we're going to get through this. And then usually it only takes about a week, and then there's this like steep drop off. Then they realize like, oh, this doesn't work anymore, okay? So these are the best behavior support plans I've ever seen. They're based on the function, addressing the function, because that's the most important thing. They're pretty short, they're doable, and they involve everybody that's important to that child's life, okay? So we're going to do one more thing before we break for lunch, and then we're going to get into the top 10 prevention and strategies in teaching children social and emotional skills. Okay, so we can go to the next one. So that's Tim's planning chart. Oh, that's right, this works now, but I love having you activate it. Okay, so you've got on your tables a piggy bank. So one of the things that we know is that children learn best from people they have a positive relationship with. So this is something that you all know to be true, and you know from your years of experience to be true, that children you have a positive relationship with are learning better from you, learning faster from you. Oh, I'm so sorry. Okay, so you need, so what we want to make sure is that we're building positive relationships with all of the children. And that is so easy for us to say right now because we're not being faced with children who have some behaviors that are pushing our buttons. But but I want us to take this time and think about how we can build positive relationships with children who engage in some behaviors we find challenging. But let me tell you just a little bit about the piggy bank metaphor if you're not familiar with it. So if you think about people that you have a positive relationship with right now, it is because you have had a series of positive interactions over time, right? You've had fun conversations. You've had shared experiences. They've given you compliments. They've asked you how you're feeling at the right time. They've given you a hug when you needed it. They gave you a call when you needed it. They've laughed with you. When you were sad, they helped you. You had a series of positive interactions over time, and that's what built this positive relationship. And when something happens in those very positive relationships, like maybe they didn't text you back right away, maybe they didn't call you back right away, when something happens like that, maybe they asked you to do something that was challenging. When something like that happens, there's a little withdrawal, right? There's a little withdrawal from your piggy bank, if you will. But it's so full with so many positive experiences and interactions over time that your relationship perseveres. So what we want to think about with young children with challenging behavior, because you're going to be asking them to do things that are difficult for them. Maybe 17 of the children in your classroom can sit and participate and circle and do great. And for one child, sitting there for 1 minute is one of the hardest things they've ever had to do. You're going to ask them to do things that are hard for them. So we want to have a very full piggy bank, right? So I want you to be thinking about what are those little deposits? What are those positive interactions that you can have with the child over time that can start building that piggy bank so that you're not constantly withdrawing and there's nothing in there, right? Children learn better and faster from people they have a positive relationship with. So I'm going to give you a couple ideas, and then at your tables I'm going to have you fill in your piggy banks. You're going to share ideas with each other and fill in your piggy banks. So here's some fun ideas. So of course they can be things like, getting down on the child's level, using their name. Those are great little interactions. Maybe it's something like when the child walks in, you say, "Oh, let me look in your eyes. Oh yeah, I can tell it's going to be a great day today." Right? Predicting success is a really great deposit. Maybe it's that during center time, you follow the child over to the block corner and just play next to them and comment on what they're doing. Not asking them questions like, "Oh, what color is that? How many blocks will that be? How big is that?" But instead just saying, "Wow, you're using 3 blocks all together to make it looks like maybe you're going to make a rectangle, so you're putting another one on top. I wonder what you're going to, now you're adding some more on the top. I wonder how tall this will be. Oh my gosh, you added even more. Wow, that is balancing so well." So just joining in their play and doing descriptive commenting is a huge deposit. And with the children that we find the most challenging, that is where we start when we're working with parents and when we're working with teachers. It's to dedicate time every day that you can join them in play and not put demands on them, but just comment on what they're doing. It's a huge deposit. There's some other really fun ones. Like I had a teacher that I worked with once, and she had these little construction paper hands, and she put some ribbon in between them. So you can imagine it's 2 hands and then a big piece of ribbon in between them. And she had a few of them prepared. And when a child came in the morning and it looked like maybe they were kind of sad, she would give them a big hug, and she was like, "You know what? I wish I could hug you all day." And so she'd put this little hug around their shoulders and staple the hands together, and she'd be like, "Here's your wearable hug. I'm hugging you all day." That's a big deposit. I worked with another teacher who was a great artist, like I'm sure some of you are. And you know how children, when they're about 4, when you walk by and you say, "Oh, I love your painting," and they say, "It's for you," right? That's like the height of that is at 4. And so what she would do is at night when she was just kind of de-stressing, she would make some pictures, and in the morning she'd come in and she'd say, "Look, I made it for you," to a certain child. And the child is like, "You think about me when you're not here?" It's a huge thing. Okay, so I want you, that's just to get your juices flowing. I want you to fill in your piggy banks fill in all those coins with those positive interactions that you can have that can start building positive relationships with children that that engage in behaviors you find challenging, okay? So start, and we'll call it in about 5 minutes. Thank you so much. I am delighted from here, I can see very full piggy banks. And I can see some people wrote in their journals, which is making Amanda very happy, wrote down some ideas. So I hope you got great ideas, because remember what I said this morning, even if all of you had only spent 1 year in the classroom, which I know is not true, I'm sure that there are some real veterans in our room today, you have over 700 years of experience collectively, so using each other to brainstorm those ideas is really fantastic. So what I do with these piggy banks is I post them in places where myself and my teaching team can see them often. Kind of like the positive thoughts. I post them sometimes next to the clock, because again, if I'm looking at the clock, it's always a good reminder that I should be making more deposits than withdrawals. Sometimes my assistant teacher and I, when we would get done teaching with the day, we would try and brainstorm all the different deposits we had made, and then try and evaluate if we had done more deposits or withdrawals. Sometimes we would need little reminders for each other, and so I had this great co-teacher one year, Jim, and he and I would put masking tape on our legs, and we would keep track of each other. Like every time we thought there was a deposit made, then we would I would try, and that became the most positive classroom ever, because we were competitive and we were trying to positive each other, but we were always making deposits with children. It was really great. So sometimes, especially for children, when we're working with children who engage in behaviors, not children are bad, but when children have some challenging behaviors, this stuff is really hard to do, right? So you have to keep each other inspired as a teaching team. You have to use some visual supports for yourself. You have to reward yourselves. So maybe it's that, you know what, if we can make, if we make 50 deposits today, we can go out for coffee or wine. Where's our wine person? Or wine after, whatever it is. So you can try and keep each other inspired, right? So the relationships becomes the foundation. The other thing to think about is that parents need these deposits as well. So one of the things that you're doing is not only working with children, but you're working with families. And you're thinking about how do you make deposits in your parents' piggy bank as well. Because there might be a time that you have to call the parents and say, I wonder if we can come in and brainstorm some ways to deal with this behavior. But that's going to go over a lot better if you have made 5 calls before that to say, I just wanted to tell you the cutest thing that Johnny did today. I wanted to tell you that Shayna had this time where she was being such a great friend. I want to make sure that you see Odell's drawing when he comes home, because he is really proud of it and we're really proud of him. Imagine that if the next call you made was, I wonder if we can come in and think about ways to help support Odell, it's going to go a lot better. So think about piggy banks with parents, think about piggy banks with children, and think about piggy banks with each other. It is really hard to do this work. It is much harder to do this work if you don't have a great team, if you don't feel like you support each other. So think about how you can do some deposits with each other to keep yourselves strong and excited. So one thing that we have in one of our staff rooms that I work in is we have a gigantic laminated piggy bank and a bunch of Post-it notes and dry erase markers. And we'll just leave compliments for each other, like, oh my gosh, I just saw Laura read, such and such book, and I couldn't even believe it was so engaging, right? So we just put lots of deposits for each other and start building that piggy bank as well. Okay, it looks to me like lunch is getting set up, and what an amazing agency that you have that is providing this lunch for you.